Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up on Dialogue, he's lived through horrors that most of us can't even imagine, much less write about. I talk with former child soldier Ishmael Bea about tragedy and redemption and what needs to be done about an issue that continues to haunt our world today. That's Dialogue. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. Every hour of every day around the world, adults illegally force thousands upon thousands of children to fight in wars. My guest today was one of those children. Ishmael Bea suddenly found himself an orphan in Sierra Leone in the 1990s during a brutal civil war in that West African country. He was just a teen, and the only way he felt he could survive was to become a soldier for the government-backed army, committing acts of violence in a drug-induced haze. His account of that time, as well as his eventual rehabilitation, is recounted in his book, A Long Way Gone. I talked with Bea at the Sun Valley Writers Conference. Since 1995, the conference has been bringing award-winning and insightful authors to Idaho to discuss their works and their views on issues of the day. I started by asking Bea why he wanted to write about such a traumatic experience. Why write the book? I mean, you could just try and forget and move on, or maybe writing a book like this helps you. It's cathartic.
I did try to forget quite a bit. When I came to the United States first, I never spoke about my experience. I never said anything about, even allowed somebody to ask me further questions about where I was from. But over the years, I began to realize that I'd been fortunate enough to not only survive the war, but to be here and to have an education, that it was a responsibility for me to talk about this, however difficult, and also that I won't forget. The more I tried to suppress it, the more difficult it became. Now, when I started to write, it was more out of frustration to really give a human context to what had happened in Sierra Leone. Because the way it was presented, there was no human context at all. But later on, I learned that by writing it, actually, it became more helpful to me because it allowed me to go to places that I didn't allow myself to go to, and to come to terms and resolve certain things, and closure for certain things, if you will, And so that really helped me quite a bit.
Tell us about Sierra Leone. I'm sure many people don't know where it is, don't know much about it at all.
Well, Sierra Leone is a very small country in West Africa. We were a former British colony, and we weren't known of at all until really when we had the war. But before the war, it was a very simple country. People had simple, remarkable lives. I grew up in a village. I went to school. I read Shakespeare.
What does it look like, the countryside?
The countryside, it depends on where you are, different parts of the country. Where I grew up in the south, there are a lot of rivers, a lot of mountains and bush, coconut trees. I grew up where if I wanted a banana, I went to my backyard and picked it from the tree. If I wanted an orange, I went up my orange tree and picked it, and things of that sort, Some of my play was, playing under the moon, running around. I didn't have electricity, but I had, I went to the river. I didn't have tap water or anything of that sort, But I lived a very happy, remarkable life, very simple,
And you read Shakespeare?
I read Shakespeare because Sierra Leone also had a very strong educational system that was modeled on the British form of education. So we read Shakespeare, even though we didn't have access to certain school materials. We read Shakespeare. I also, where I grew up, my father worked for an American mining company, and through that came American culture, and there were some Peace Corps volunteers. I was introduced to American hip-hop music, and so I knew of all of these things.
And Rambo movies.
And of course, Rambo movies, Chuck Norris, and, what is the guy's name? The governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and things of that sort,
It always amazes me how little we in America often know about countries like Sierra Leone, and then the people in that country know an awful lot about our culture.
Yes, when I actually came to the United States first, that was some of the things that discouraged me quite a bit, in a sense that when people asked me where I was from and I told them Sierra Leone, a good number of people had no idea where that was. But here I was, I knew a lot of things there was to know about the United States, you know.
You probably thought it was Sierra Mist, the drink or something like that.
A lot of people actually thought that. Funny you should mention it.
Really?
People really did think
Oh,
that.
not me. Tell us about your family, your mother, your father, your siblings. Who were they? What did they do?
Well, I grew up in a family of 3 boys, including myself. I was the second born, so I had an older brother, Junior, and then I had a younger brother, Ibrahim, and then I was the second born. And my father was worked for this American mining company. He was a scientist, so he worked in the laboratory where they test soil samples and things of that sort. And then my mother was a sort of a businesswoman, a trader. She sold like goods in the market, like, you know, fish, pepper, and, you know, palm oil and things like that, you know.
Everything happened so quickly. Everything changed so quickly. Not even any time to say goodbye, right?
Yes, because the war had started in 1991 and we had heard of it, but I don't think we really believed. You know, based on the sort of culture we grew up in where there was a sense of community, everyone who was older than you was responsible for you, for disciplining you and also for feeding you. We just didn't quite really believe that this was possible. The violence we were hearing of that started in the eastern part of the country, we didn't think it was possible to come anywhere at all. And so when the war reached us, actually I had gone out of town with my older brother and another friend to a talent show when the war reached. So it wasn't as if
To do some of your hip hop.
to do our hip hop stuff. So it was like, oh, we're just going, we'll come back later. And that was it.
So you don't remember the last thing you said to your dad or anything? Wow.
No. So that was it. You know, the moment was so fragile. You never even said goodbye to anybody. You didn't really know whether this was going to happen.
It teaches you a lot, right, about the fragility of life. So you went to this talent show, and when you were at the talent show, you heard the word that your town that you had come from was under siege, or you couldn't go back to it.
Yes, my town was Mogbemo, where I grew up, and we heard that it had been attacked. And we tried to go back, but then we encountered people coming, running the other direction. And they had been hurt. Some people had been struck by stray bullets. There was a woman who was carrying, you know, she had tied her baby behind her back and she was running from the war, and her child had been struck by a bullet. And I remember just this woman's face when she removed her child to realize that this child had died while she was running, trying to save her. And perhaps the only reason why she was alive was because the baby was behind her back. And just the pain on a mother's face to show that, you know, even a child at this point was not spared anymore in this madness that had taken over this country.
There were so many opportunities while you were running, trying to find safety, that you could have been killed.
Yes, I mean, even to this day, is one of the things that always, it grounds me in a way, but also it's unbelievable to me in the sense that, you know, I used to believe that I survived because I knew how to fight, particularly when I started fighting. But now that I think about it, I survived for various other reasons. Pure luck, the grace of God, because there was no way I could have survived there were so many chances of getting killed, you know, constant running, because it became difficult to be a young boy in this country. Because trying to find family, there was hunger. Everyone was afraid of young people because they were being recruited on all sides of the war. So when you came to a town or village where once you'd be greeted and taken care of, people didn't quite trust your innocence anymore, because that was used to spy on towns and attack it.
You could be part of a roving gang or something
exactly.
like that.
So everyone wanted to kill you, and everyone wanted to recruit you. So it became very difficult to be a boy, or, you know, or a young person. Boys and girls had the same fate. It became very difficult at this point. So you constantly had to stay alive, to the point that I got accustomed to thinking of my life in a very short term. As if I survive the next minute, then there's a possibility I may survive the next minute. That's how I began to think.
And eventually you came to a village where somebody told you that your parents or part of your family was there and alive, but it was unfortunately too late.
It was too late. Some of the kids that I've been running with, you know, we were told our families were in this village. We went and we encountered somebody who had actually seen them on the way as we got closer to the village, because the war was spreading towards the capital city. And so as we got closer, the place was attacked. Everyone was killed in the village. People were burned alive. You know, people were executed. And we pretty much arrived in the ruins of this madness.
Do you believe your family was in there?
Yes.
Do you believe that?
It's a very small country. If they had been alive after that, I would have been able to find them. It's been, you know, yeah.
So such a short period of time that you might have been able to
Yeah.
But had you seen them, then you might have been
I would have been killed as
killed
well.
with everybody else.
But, you know, the pain after what happened, the pain of knowing that I had this immediate family and all of a sudden they were all gone, they were killed, and I was the only one remaining, was so difficult at that time and for many years that I actually wished I had been there with them to die, because I felt like it would have been easier than to remain alive and deal with the pain that came after that, you know, discovery, you know. So it was very, very difficult.
Have you talked to survivors of the Holocaust about those type of issues?
I have.
Survivor guilt and.
I have met with a lot of people. I mean, in the sense that I think it's just, you know, I don't necessarily see it as guilt. It's just the sense of
Remorse or.
Beginning to think that why did I survive and not them? You know, in the sense that, you know, what is so important and remarkable about my own life that I stayed alive and not them, you know. And for me, I've used that as a way to live my life better, because I know that I'm alive for some reason, you know.
The child soldier period, eventually, whatever safety you could find was in this encampment that the Army was running and recruiting boys like yourself. And it was really, really, really tough for you to take up that gun at first. But then, as you say, it was almost like drinking water to kill people, because they had drugged you. And
well, at the beginning, in the beginning, you know, you find yourself as a child, you're running from this war, you have nowhere to go, and you become the perfect target. You no longer have a family. My home was destroyed. My town was, you know, destroyed. Houses burned down. There was nobody to claim my life. So I found myself in this place that seemed the safest place at that time, because I had a place to sleep, I got something to eat, and that changed, of course, to being forced into fighting. Now, what you have to realize when you find yourself in any encampment, whether it's the government army or the rebel groups, when you leave that group to run, if they don't kill you because they think you're trying to desert them, when you go somewhere else, they will kill you because they will think you're a spy. So you compromise, your life is compromised. And also there's coercion. You have no choice. If you're told what to do, you don't do it, you can get killed, to set example that no one can resist command. You're fed drugs. You see violence becomes the order of your life. You see people being executed every single day. Every few 5-10 minutes, things bad are happening that involves blood being spilled. So you get accustomed to it. You stop, you lose the ability to exercise certain emotions. You stop crying. You stop feeling sorry for certain things. You know, in order to stay alive, you shut down those tendencies to be able to stay alive. So those are pretty much what happened during the war. And of course, you're recruited, you're afraid of the gun, but you get to know that the other groups that also consist children don't care, because they also lost themselves psychologically, being drugged.
And they're telling you that these are the people that killed your family, your friends.
Exactly. There's also the idea of revenge. We're going to go get these people that are responsible for what had happened to us, for putting us in this position. Well, not realizing that actually by doing that, you perpetuate this cycle of violence. Because through that process, we hurt people who had nothing to do with what had happened to us, but that gave them a reason to be dragged into the same madness again. So this became sort of that, you know.
Was there anything about it that you remember being more difficult than anything else?
I think one of the most difficult moments was the initial entrance into this madness, you know. The first day that I went to war. And we were also trained in the middle of war, so it wasn't as if as regular soldiers trained for years and get all the things. We were trained for less than a week. All we knew how to do was to eat any food in 1 minute, because when they gave you a ration and they started counting, you know, 60 to 1 to 60, if you didn't finish eating, they took it from you. That's all we knew how to do. So perfection came by actually going and fighting during war. And I remember the first day of going to fight and just how much blood there was, you know, how some of the kids that were as young as 9 years old were killed next to me, you know, and realizing that, you know, if I don't shoot this gun, I'm going to get killed as well.
People look at you today, though, and they hear you speak so eloquently, and they think, how could this be the same person that writes about how many people he killed?
It took many years for me to learn how to function as a normal human being. I was at a rehabilitation center for 8 months just to even learn how to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I developed a strong insomnia that to this day is with me. I've become conditioned in certain ways I look alive, certain ways I function, So people sometimes think it was just this very quick fix, but it took a very long time for me to learn how to reach to the point that I am today, or to even sit in a classroom, peacefully without being, distracted and sort of shaking and, sort of restless,
You talk about how really nothing much bothers you anymore after having gone through something like that. I mean, you're pretty even-keeled, yes?
I am. This is not. I'm still a human being, so this is not to say that I don't get upset and so on. But I think I have. I probably tolerate more things, and I'm less. You have to really push me to get me angry, because there's so many things that I've seen in comparison to certain things. For example, when I was in school, in high school and in college, during exam time, everyone would be, sort of, losing their minds and, freaking out a little bit and shaking and be like, And I used to laugh, because I'd be like, I'm going to study as hard as I can, but if I can pass the test, it's not the end of the world. I've seen worse things, There are worse things that can happen to you. So I have that perspective, And I don't use it to be lazy, but I use it as it's not the end of the world. If somebody pushes me, I live in New York, on the train so they can get on and they want to get the seat, I laugh, because I think, okay, it's all right,
Compared to what you've lived through.
Yeah.
So then tell me what your emotions were, or did it make you angry when people called into question parts of this book, which they did. If somebody does a search on your name, they say, well, he didn't really fight for 2 years, he just fought for a couple months. Did that make you angry?
No, it made me sad a little bit. And what it made me do, it made me realize that I needed to do more work, because even as I speak to you, this is going on today with a lot of young people that are going through similar experiences and even worse than I did. And also, when I wrote this book, I actually edited a lot, so I didn't even write about all the stuff that happened.
Well, yeah, the section in it about being a child soldier was pretty slim in comparison to everything else.
Because I was writing not to write about to glorify the violence. I wanted people to get a sense of what the violence was and what it did to people, but it wasn't about the violence. I didn't put myself in a war so that I can write about it. War happened to me, and then I wrote about it. There's a difference between that. So I wasn't walking around with a book in my hand, writing down facts and taking pictures and documenting it, so that I can present it. But people had that sense of, be like, well, tell us exactly where you are at this point. Do you have proof? All I have is my memories of what happened.
And your memory still is that you fought for 2 years.
Those are my memories, and that's accurate. And when also people didn't realize that when you write a book, they don't just publish it, they fact check it, But what it made me, it didn't make me upset. What it made me feel that I need to do more to be able to talk about this to people, because if there are still people to this day who can question the possibility of this, whether this happens, whether it's accurate or not, then we have a big problem.
I don't think they were questioning whether you went through it. They were just questioning whether you went through it for as long as you said that you did.
Yes, how could I forget that, And they were like, well, how can I forget that, I can't. Because a lot of things that have been happening in my life were different. The war was more significant than anything that happened in my life in Sierra Leone. It was different, so I remember most of it. It's been verified, it's been proven, everything. When I wrote this book, any memory that I doubted, I threw out of the picture. But this is the thing that upset me the most about the whole thing, is that a lot of people have wrote about what happened to us. And as an African person, as a Sierra Leone, a lot of people write about us. But when we write about ourselves, then it's questioned. It's almost as if we don't have the capacity of the same mental stamina as the other people who write about us. So we possibly cannot get our own stories right. An outsider who comes in for 1 or 2 days can get our story better than we do, who have lived there all our lives.
You mentioned the rehabilitation, those people as heroes in your life, and in particular a woman who helped you named Esther. Have you been able to see her again? You went back to Sierra Leone. I think probably a lot of people have that question.
Yes, I've gone back to Sierra Leone quite a lot. And Esther doesn't live in Sierra Leone anymore. She actually lives in Canada. And I was able to find her because of the book. When the book came out, a lot of people that I've lost touch with in my life, I was able to find them. And these were moments that were actually quite remarkable. Not only Esther, I was also able to find Mr. Kamara, who was the guy who was in charge of the rehabilitation center. He lives in Boston now with his family. And one time I was actually at the Kennedy Center in Boston giving a presentation, and he was in the audience. And those moments were very precious to me because, then the book came alive, and I would say, "Yeah, as Mr. Kamara, you talk to him now," and people ask him questions, you know. So it was really important for me for those moments, you know, for people to see that some of these things that I've been writing about, I wasn't just like, you know, making them up, and they part of them come alive and people see them.
You mentioned that this is still going on all over the world, child soldiers.
Yes.
People feel like, what can I do? What can I possibly do to help? Are there things that they can do?
There are a lot of things can be done. Well, the way to prevent children from being used into war is to make sure wars don't happen. Because once wars break out in some of these places, young people will be sought after, because in a lot of these countries, the youth population is the larger part of the population. So when war breaks out, eventually they will become the recruiting, you know, and some of them are disgruntled, they are in complete poverty. And it's to make sure wars don't start, it's to alleviate poverty. And all of us can support that through initiatives that various organizations do on the ground to change people's lives around, to have people have more faith in the possibility of their lives, you know, and things of that. So that's something that people can do. On the bigger front is to put laws in place that hold people accountable who recruit children, that make sure that weapons are not sold into these countries that have wars, where people are being killed arbitrarily, you know. When I was in the war, there were guns from everywhere, from the United States, from the UK, from Germany. There are guns from everywhere. This is not a research when I was there. We had M16s, we had AK-47s, we had G3 weapons, we had German weapons, you know. So we had all these kinds of weapons that people were selling into. We don't make guns in Sierra Leone. We don't have gun factories, so people were. So there is that. There's an interest for people to make sure that that doesn't happen, you know. I'm not worried if you sell weapons to an army to protect its people. But when you sell it during the war, when you know the sole purpose is to kill people arbitrarily and to put it in the hands of children, then that's bad. There's natural resource problems. In Sierra Leone, we had diamonds, and they were exploited during the war.
Should people be buying diamonds if they...
I'm not against people buying diamonds. I think a lot of people may have missed the point when blood diamond came out of some people. People say, oh, I don't want to buy diamonds. They are natural resources. Of course, if people stop buying diamonds, my country, Sierra Leone, is worse off because it's one of our major natural resources. What we're advocating is for people not to buy diamonds when there's a war in a country, not to buy diamonds from that country because it will support the war. But when there's no longer a war, now we need people to buy diamonds from Sierra Leone so we can actually rebuild the country. So I'm not against people wearing diamonds or anything, but just those are some of the things that people can do to support rehabilitation for people coming from the war, young people, so that they can become active members of their societies again, give them life.
Like you were with Benin House.
Like I was, you know.
Should child soldiers be put on trial?
No, absolutely not. You know, no child starts a war. People are dragged into war for various reasons, sometimes directly and indirectly. Even when a child volunteers to fight on their own, there is a coercive element behind it. It's because maybe they're abused at home, they live home, or sometimes they have no other option left. It's either that or death. You know, so there are so many things. Children should not be prosecuted at all because children can be given a second chance to live their lives again. And so you can't do that. It's legally wrong because there are laws in place that says you can't do that. You know.
You've said that you've quoted Maya Angelou in terms of anger and how you deal with your situation, that you can be angry but not bitter.
Yes.
Is that how you feel?
That's still how I feel. Anger is necessary because you can use your anger to shed light on something that you feel has been said wrong, whatever it is. But when you allow bitterness consumes you, as Maya Angelou says, you know, it blinds you to seeing the purpose of what it is that you really want to accomplish. When I was writing, the intention was never to actually publish this book. I was writing it for myself. I was writing it because I wanted to get it out. I wanted to keep it. I wanted to get to certain places. And also because I wanted to be able to have somewhat of a tangible thing about my life. Because, for example, when I came to the United States and I started applying for schools, most schools wouldn't take me because I didn't have a report card. When you run from a war, you don't have a report card. So I had to write about why I didn't have a report card. When I was in high school, I couldn't provide a baby picture for my yearbook because I didn't have that. Most people had that, simple things. So I had to write a poem, maybe about how I look like or what I, you know. So I began to write as a way to recreate a past that had no record of myself. And it was all for me. And later on, when I was done with it, then, you know, I decided to publish it. So what I'm saying is that people can use an outlet to talk about, to understand their suffering but it should never be the reason to get it out there to publish, because when you get it out there, it becomes another issue. You have to stand behind it, you have to go out and speak about it, and if you're not strong enough within yourself to do that, it could be more damaging to you.
And what's next for you?
Well, I'll continue to write. I'm working on a novel because it's very emotionally exhausting to write nonfiction. So I'm working on a novel set in Sierra Leone. That's where my stuff is based at this point. And I'm pretty far along the way with it, so I should be done soon. I intend to go back to school. I want to actually go to law school and study international law. Yeah, we'll see where life takes me.
Would this be a movie?
There's a lot of interest in making it a film, this book. There has been since it came out, but I've been reluctant to give it to anyone because I want it to be made very well with integrity, because for me, this story, even though it's my story, the way it's received, the way people think about it, what it does to people, reflects how people think about those children that are there right now and those that are suffering. So I'm very careful about that, So I've refused to have it done, but I think at some point it will get done. But I don't want it to be a Hollywood version of an African country, It's not that simplistic. There are nuances, but also I want people to understand the complexities that comes with war, that when it consumes communities and human beings. It's not just the good guys and the bad guys. It's more complex than that. I grew up as a very simple young boy, and then I ended up being a soldier and doing things that I never thought I was capable of doing. And then here I am again. So it's not that simple, So I'm worried about that. So it will get done at some point, but if I never find a person that I feel has integrity to do it well, I'd rather not have it done into a movie.
Well, you have a lot of strength. Thanks for sharing time with me and by proxy our viewers today. So I appreciate you taking time to talk with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was Ishmael Bea, a former child soldier who wrote a book about his experiences called A Long Way Gone. His home now is New York City, where he was brought by an American woman who had heard him speak at a United Nations conference. Ishmael went on to graduate from college and, as you heard, is continuing to write and hopes to become an attorney. Our interview was conducted at the Sun Valley Writers Conference. I'd like to thank Mr. Bea and the organizers of that conference for finding time in his schedule for our conversation. If you missed part of this interview, want to see it again, or learn more about Mr. Bea, please go to the Dialogue website. That's also where you can watch past interviews from our Sun Valley Writers Conference series and find out more about the event itself. For Dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning in.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. To order a copy of this program from Idaho Public Television, call our toll-free number or visit us on the World Wide Web